All Star snubs and who should have been on the team.
Seems like you have a couple names in mind here.
I do. And the biggest guy and the most prominent guy that the CBG, Philip Forsberg. We've been promoting the heck out of him.
Our dude.
His team is sitting number 1, 39 points as a rookie, and he's a plus 23.
Unheard of.
Incredible. And then we got guys like Pavel Datsyuk who were left off, PK Subban. And, okay, the one that kind of shocked me, and I was kind of surprised to see the Islanders as high as they were, Yaroslav Halak. How is he not on the team?
Marc-Andre Fleury and Yaroslav Halak weren't originally included on this list.
Yeah.
Sergei Bobrovsky, I mean, of course it's at Nationwide Arena in Columbus, so you understand why they want to include Blue Jackets players. I mean, Nick Foligno is the captain of the All-Star game, for heaven's sakes. I love my Blue Jackets. That's absolutely ludicrous. Marc-Andre Fleury has 6 shutouts. The New York Islanders wouldn't be anywhere close to where they are right now. What are they, tied for the 4th or tied for 3rd right now? 59 points at the All-Star weekend?
Yeah, and Halak has 23 wins with 4 shutouts. They've never had any stability in that net for the last 14 years, and he's come in there and he's played phenomenal.
You look at the roster of the New York Islanders, I understand maturing, like John Tavares, other people like growing into their roles, like even Griffin Reinhart coming up from, the dub. The only big thing that's changed from, say, 2-3 years ago, they've been a playoff team, but the only thing that's really changed substantially is that they've gotten that goaltending.
Sustainable goaltenders. Like a goaltender who's gonna step up and be able to shut down the other team star, like make that big save in key moments, right? And they have him. St. Louis is still happy with Brian Elliott, but Yaroslav Halak is phenomenal, and he's showing some shades of that Montreal run.
One forward I want to talk about, though, is an omission. There's nothing really right now to be scared about playing the Toronto Maple Leafs, past maybe Phil Kessel heating up every once in a while. James Van Riemsdyk, though, 19 goals and 21 assists. He has the 9th most goals in the league, and you can't say that you can't include him on a 40-man All-Star roster.
Now, I'm not a huge fan of this. Just because you have an NHL team, you get to send an All-Star, where it's like, there's teams that are much more deserving to have 7 All-Stars even. Well, not 7, but at least 3 or 4, right? Guys go. And those 3 or 4 guys have more points than anyone on said team, and they're just not going. The one pick I love is Zemgus Girgensons.
Zemgus Girgensons from
Latvia.
Of the Buffalo Sabres, his 3rd NHL year, blew everybody out of the water in terms of All-Star voting. It was Zemgus Girgensons and 5 Chicago Blackhawks, and then the rest.
So Chicago had an entire city behind them, right? Which is incredible, and they did a great job of voting for them. But Latvia, all of Latvia was behind Zemgus.
I think they put it into Google Analytics, and 88% of all of his votes, the 1.5 million votes that you could only do once a day from a separate IP address, they all came from Latvia.
I'm not surprised.
Not to say that Latvia is even centrally European particularly, but I like to think of, the town that Borat lives in.
Yeah.
Where everybody just goes home after work and votes for Zemgus Girgensons, and then you can go out and live about your day and do normal things like go to the pub after.
It's a government mandate.
Yeah, like you have to check in at the police office with a stamp to ensure that, yes, I voted for Zemgus Girgensons today.
And it's nice because it's on the Sabres and they suck. We're going to move past the All-Star snubs, and we're going to get into the most surprising teams in the NBA right now. Obviously, the biggest one, and the one that everyone has started to talk about a lot more, is the emergence of the Atlanta Hawks and Coach Budenholzer, who was a former assistant in the San Antonio Spurs organization for however many years.
Atlanta's 31-8. I'm an only child, so I make lists all the time. My power rankings at the beginning of the year, Atlanta was somewhere between 22 and 26.
I had Atlanta barely making the playoffs as an 8th seed.
In the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, but, just looking at their ball movement, one of the guys I really like on that team is Jeff Teague. I always knew he was kind of that underlying star on that team, and he'd get a lot better. But last year they had a lot of injury problems with Paul Millsap being out and then Al Horford being out for a long period of time and not really getting that chemistry. Now Al Horford's back. He's not a 7-foot monster who's going to block your shot. He's a really good defender, however, staying down, doing a good job rebounding. He's not going to out-jump anybody. But, man, that guy is the focal point of that offense, and he can score anywhere.
I think for the first time since maybe 08, 09, something we're seeing from the Atlanta Hawks is that they actually have some semblance of depth on the bench.
Correct.
Where you have a couple of guys who are making a lot of money,
Yeah.
i.e. Paul Millsap, even Kyle Korver to a degree.
Yeah.
But they've put together a system that people have bought into. I don't want to say the San Antonio Spurs just yet, but they're running that type of unselfish basketball.
One of the things I like to compare them a little bit more than the Spurs, they definitely have that ball movement, but every guy's kind of unselfish, knows their role. More like the Pistons team, the 04 Pistons team with Rasheed Wallace, Chauncey Billups, right? And Chauncey Billups kind of looks like Jeff Teague in a weird way. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But that's the kind of team that they have. Obviously, Al Horford's much better than Ben Wallace offensively. I mean, he can actually hit free throws and he can score the ball in various ways.
But to have a presence like that inside that's
Correct.
developed within your organization and system
And
that you can trust.
Rip Hamilton is exactly like Kyle Korver, and he's just knocking down his shots. Mike Scott off the bench, DeMar Carroll, like that is a deep, deep team, and they don't really get the respect that they deserve, even now.
Did anybody think 2 years ago during the NBA draft when the Atlanta Hawks took Dennis Schrader or Schroeder out of Germany that this guy wasn't white?
Yeah.
See that highlight like 3 days ago. How often do you actually see the Atlanta Hawks play basketball?
He's got that little patch of like blonde hair.
That pseudo Wiz Khalifa hair.
Yeah. But no, Dennis Schroeder can honestly he's such a responsible point guard. And he's really underrated on the defensive end. Like he doesn't get enough respect there, but
he reminds me a little bit of a Patrick Beverley that's a lot better and more responsible on offense. I think when the Atlanta Hawks, because right now it's inconceivable for me to find them out of the top 4 in the Eastern Conference, because you look at the standings, Milwaukee is in 5th place. They're 21-19.
And they don't have one of their main pieces because Jabari Parker's injured.
I can't see Atlanta falling out of the top 4 because, well, just as an aside here, it's super frustrating looking at these standings because in the Western Conference, the Phoenix Suns are 23-18 right now, and they're in 8th place.
Exactly.
By contrast, in the Eastern Conference, the Brooklyn Nets would make the playoffs if the season ended today, and they are 6 and 5 games under 500 respectively.
The West, not even just them, like San Antonio is fighting for a playoff spot. When have you ever said San Antonio is fighting for a playoff spot? I mean, the Jazz are even good. The Utah Jazz are playing hard, right? And it's not like they're not a tough out. Like you actually have to beat the Utah Jazz now.
The NBA might have to consider realignment at some point. I mean, looking at this list, teams in the Western Conference, I think everybody except for LA and Minnesota, who are the bottom dwellers, for good reasons. It's apparent they can't compete with many people. They can take on pretty much anybody in the Eastern Conference. I'd put Chicago, Toronto, Washington, and Atlanta in the upper tier, but
that division.
It helps Toronto a lot that they play in by far the worst division in basketball.
But even when they go on their West Coast trips and they're able to win games,
no, they're competitive.
Yeah.
In a different division though, they wouldn't have 26 wins. If you take the average of the competition in some sort of advanced analytic or stat, they might have 21 or 22. It helps a lot that you play Brooklyn, New York, and Philadelphia so much in a year.
How bad has New York basketball gotten, though? Like, it is just atrocious.
It's borderline unwatchable.
It kind of hurts too because that's the mecca of basketball, right? And seeing that Knicks documentary that came out this year, right, when the Garden was Eden with Phil Jackson and that team that last won the NBA championship, and then now seeing this one and having Phil take it over. I mean, I think he's doing a good job now that he's just kind of getting rid of everybody, shedding cap, and I think he is making a legitimate run for Jahlil Okafor.
Watch out for 2 years. In 2 years from now, watch out for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, possibly.
But right now, like this, we've said the same thing about the Sixers for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
When's enough going to be enough? I mean, you can hide away in a small market like New Orleans or Charlotte or even Cleveland.
Yeah.
New York gets so much attention, though. I mean, I turn on the radio. I start at work at 5 a.m. most mornings. That's what you hear for maybe 45 minutes consistently. It's the middle of the regular season. It's January. It's not like we're approaching the finals and New York has a chance to get in there. New York has won 5 games. They're 5-36.
Yeah.
And Carmelo Anthony might be shut down for the
year. Their season is effectively done.
Absolutely.
And they're not trading Amari Stoudemire, who is their second best piece to trade. It's like get rid of him, get picks back for him, get a first round pick, whatever you can out of like that was a bad move from when it first started. They're irrelevant. They're honestly irrelevant right now, and that sucks to say about Carmelo Anthony too, because that's an NBA superstar who is on an irrelevant team
in his prime.
In his prime, and he he should have went to Atlanta when he had the chance.
Another team I want to talk about, though. The Cleveland Cavaliers right now are 20-20.
Yeah.
How do you see them finishing up?
I think that they'll go on a little bit of a tear to finish out, but the main thing that needs to change with them is their defense. And I know everybody in the sports world knows that and has touched on it, but these guys are absolutely atrocious defensively, and they just don't compete hard. Like, the only guy that I feel like competes hard is Kyrie Irving.
I think a name that you should think of when you think of Cleveland going forward is Mark Jackson. A big thing with Cleveland is them not respecting David Blatt. It's one thing to not listen to what a coach is telling you day in, day out. You get tired of these guys. You spend more time with your teammates and your coaches in a year than you do with your wife and kids. But reports out of Cleveland say that these guys aren't even doing the plays that the coach is calling from the sidelines.
Yeah. Incredible to think about, because he is honestly a really good offensive coach. He's not great defensively. I know people are like, oh, well, he's never coached in the league before. But, I mean, even Pop touched on it, and he respects David Blatt and his system. But it's just that kind of, they hired David Blatt, and they didn't really ask LeBron what he wanted. They should have waited it out. And, I mean, with Steve Kerr going to the Golden State Warriors and Mark Jackson not really ending up anywhere, he would have been a really good fit for this offense.
Especially defensively. He gets guys to buy into his system. It's not a system that's always worked. Golden State had their growing pains with him in the beginning, and we're finally seeing the Golden State Warriors perhaps better than they were ever meant to be under Steve Kerr. Something to keep in mind, though, is that LeBron controls this organization. He signed a 2-year contract with an opt-out clause, and it was understood, kind of tongue-in-cheek, that he will re-sign forever. Like 1 and 2 year deals, maybe like max contracts across the board for the rest of his career, because the money in the NBA is only going to go up with the television money they have. But if you're Cleveland, this guy can't leave a second time. You can't even give him the chance. You have to give him the key to the city to make sure that he stays. Some people would say LeBron would never leave again, but when you think about 18, 20 years from now, when LeBron is in the Hall of Fame and we're having these conversations about MJ or LeBron, Kobe's might be in that conversation, depends how the next year and a half, 2 years go. Yeah, I know you think that. If the only thing that they say about LeBron is he has only 3 championships, assuming he gets there with Cleveland eventually.
I don't know if that's enough to put him. That's definitely not enough in my books to put him over Michael Jordan.
The LA Clippers look very enticing. You could go to Washington. Any team is going to clear the money for you. If you're LeBron James, you control the entire league.
Milwaukee looks better at this point than Cleveland does. And I love Matthew Dellavedova. Like, that kid competes hard. But a lot of the guys that they have are just, like, they coast. On defense, especially.
On that note, you have to keep LeBron because you've mortgaged your entire future.
Yeah.
On this year, next year, and maybe the third one, because you traded away the past 2 first overall picks for Kevin Love, who isn't a guaranteed thing on every night. You don't know going in if he's going to get 12 points or 25. You trade away your future 2 first-round picks for Timofey Mozgov.
Can I just interject and say, how good would Andrew Wiggins look on this team right now? Like, that was the biggest mistake that they made. And then they traded Dion Waiters, and it's like they don't really have a shooting guard, right? And Wiggins would have been perfect. Wiggins would have been absolutely perfect because Tristan Thompson was a phenomenal power forward, and he has the potential to be an all-star. They didn't need Kevin Love. They had a future superstar in Andrew Wiggins.
You should see Amar right now. He has the biggest smile on his face, but he is very mad.
It is ludicrous that they traded Andrew Wiggins for Kevin Love.
Amar Khan, direct and air traffic here over the recent trades by the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Well, that does it for us here at the CBG Show. I'm Amar Khan.
I'm Chris Brentlinger-Grant.